Corn School is brought to you by BASF and PRIDE Seeds.
Bernard Tobin here for Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, joined by Aaron Stevanus, market agronomist, PRIDE Seeds. Hey, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for being here.
Hey, London Farm Show, early March. I want to talk today about, this is pretty much the end of the trade show season. All those meetings about what we've learned this winter, and talk about what's going to happen the next month or so. Things are going to start get rolling next month or two. Let's talk about what we learned, and let's go back to last fall, and people were starting to sort of harvest their flag tests. Big push on that. Weed Peak did one for RealAgriculture based on a lot of Randy Dowdy's thinking about that even emergence. You've seen a lot of that research this winter. What have we learned?
Well, I think Peter did a great job of summing that up, and him and I think Veritas worked on that a little bit together, and it was neat to see the data that it came out of. So it blew his mind, because I know he was telling me, he said, I can't believe that this is what it is, but he said these are actual yields that they harvested, and he said if in that 24-hour emergence, that difference was a 5% yield difference. So if you're growing 200 bushel corn, we're talking about 10 bushels, and that's substantial. And so what are we looking at there? What is the difference? And there's lots of things. For me, it all comes back to the planter. The planter is a major thing.
And that's something we can tussle. If we haven't tussled with it already, we need to get into it.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's the one thing that's great about the London Farm Show is we come into this spot, everybody's kind of getting ready. We're starting to think about spring, because as soon as London Farm Show hits, we'll be in the field planting in no time. So what do you need to do with your planter? And so it really comes down to making sure that plant is coming out of the ground evenly. So what can you do with that? So a part of it is down pressure, making sure you have correct down pressure on your corn planter. There's lots of things here you could buy, like everything that'll give you that automatic down pressure, and that'll work. But still, a part of it is an easy test. If you don't have, say, sensors or automatic down pressure, you can go out, simply stop your corn planter, keep it in the ground, and go out and be aggressive on your gauge wheels. If you can just lightly move that gauge wheel, you're probably at just about the right pressure. If it's like cemented into the ground, you are way too heavy and you need to relieve some of that pressure. And if you can freewheel that gauge wheel, then you have not enough pressure and need to put more on. So that's one thing. The other thing is the classic, just make sure your toolbar is leveled. So just put that toolbar on the side of your frame, make sure that planter is in the ground engaged, and make sure it's level. And that can easily just be an adjustment of your tongue, or your 3-point hitch. If you got a 3-point hitch semi-attachment, then just adjust that, and that can make the world of difference. Because what you're doing is, if that planter is running downhill, then all of a sudden your gauge wheels aren't working properly. Because essentially the back part of your planter, so you're getting your planter in the ground, probably even a little bit deeper, you're pushing too much weight on that front, which is maybe putting too much down pressure also, which will be sidewall compaction issues there. But then also you're not closing your trench properly. You could have air pockets. You could not be surrounding that seed with due to the air pockets, not surrounding the seed with saturated moist soil. So then all of a sudden your germination becomes an issue. So that's another issue when it comes down to that even emergence. One more thing I'd like to tag on that most people don't talk about are the gauge wheels. So sometimes if your gauge wheel, for example, if you're not checking your gauge wheel every year, or even while you're planting, if it's not right tight against that double disc opener, and especially if you're in sandy soil, because I've seen this happen tons of times walking behind planters while I'm planting plots, is that if it's not tight, you'll get that sand come around the gauge wheel and into the seed trench, and what you're doing then is you're taking that dry topsoil from the top, putting it right on top of the seed, so not giving it enough moisture, so it's not germinating. So then you can really inhibit your natural germination, which also alleviates an even stand. Talking from our Real Ag radio that we just broadcasted here, I think Peter and Dan both mentioned that you look at those growers that are really pushing the yield, pushing their system. Most of them go over their planter with a fine-tooth comb in the spring or in the winter every year, just to make sure everything's working properly.
Hey, planning. Let's talk about some other equipment and some other sort of management approaches. A lot of discussion this winter about split-end nitrogen.
Absolutely.
We've seen a lot of it in past years, but it just seems to be, so many guys are thinking putting down anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds, and then figuring out what that crop needs later in the season.
Yep, I agree 100%. So, and it all comes back to Fred Below's graph. So I'm sure everybody's seen it now. It's that nitrogen uptake curve when that corn plant is taking up nitrogen and where it's partitioning throughout the season. So we have a major uptake in nitrogen when we get into that, essentially in that V6, V8, it's just a major upward linear uptake. So it just makes sense to split your N. Now the biggest issue I'd say when it comes to that, to looking at your nitrogen, don't look at 1 year's data. So this year, if you look at a bunch of the trials out there, there was not a lot of yield advantage on splitting your nitrogen, and it's mostly because we have a dry year. And I think a lot of it, there's a lot of comments this year, and it seemed to be no matter where in my zone, and even talking to other agronomists within the zones, is that when we got a rain, so it was so dry in some areas for so long, when we got a rain, we thought that corn was dead, and then it somehow greened up. Well, it's because nitrogen's a mass flow nutrient. It needs soil solution to move it into the crowns of that and the roots of that plant. And so we got that. It came out of the organic matter, it came available, and it went right into the corn plant. So we didn't really see a major payback on split application of nitrogen because we weren't actively using it because it was too dry. You get a year like 2015, we got a whole different story. We got lots of moisture, great growing conditions. A lot of trials that I saw done with some of my retails that I work with, there was we were talking in that 10 to 15 bushel response to splitting up nitrogen. So it's there. I think the biggest thing was we need to think about timing. We need to maybe look at the different application units and when we can get it on there, and think about when that corn plant's using it. And the final part of that is it's a stewardship thing. If you can keep less nitrogen out of our water or the environment by putting it on at the right time when that corn's using it up, it's a good environmental stewardship practice, plus it saves us money.
Right rate saves you money.
That's right. It's all about those 4 hours, and if you can save yourself a little bit of inputs and get the same amount of yield, or even maybe push the yields when that corn's needing it, then I think that's really advantageous.
Last point, Western bean cutworm.
Yep.
Big discussion last year.
Absolutely.
People talk about, hey, do we scout? What products do we have available? We've seen a little news in the last little while, new products.
Yep, absolutely. So Delegate is a new product that's available that'll control. Well, it's been out for cereals, but it's been registered for Western bean cutworm on corn. So we have a new active ingredient to work with, which is awesome. Back to that Real Ag conversation. Dan made a great comment saying we got to have multiple modes of action here. It's not just spraying it with, say, Delegate. We got to maybe looking at a Delegate and a Matador, or a Delegate and a Coragen, or Syngenta even has a co-mix of Matador and Coragen together. So there you have it there. That multiple mode of action moving forward. It's all about keeping these tools in the toolbox because we want to control these pests. I think Peter was right in saying that we don't really know these pests yet. We need to learn a little bit more because there's going to be a lot of acres sprayed this year just because of some of the disasters we had in 2016. And we need to do some more research on understanding this pest, maybe a little bit easier scouting, who knows, maybe even drone imagery to help. But the one thing that I found interesting, my zone doesn't have a lot of Western bean cutworm damage, but it was interesting that those peak flights that happened, in my area, they kind of happened past tasseling. And before, in test plots, you'd go through and you'd see, well, why is there Western bean cutworm in this variety but not in this variety? And you go back to your notes, there's a major difference in flowering, and then maybe just that flight happened over when the other one wasn't flowered. Because normally, it kind of was a bit of a rule of thumb that if it was tasseled, then you probably wouldn't lay eggs in tasseled corn. But we had a lot of flights this year, and a lot of them flew over tasseled corn, and there was Western bean cutworm damage to tasseled corn. So we do not have a full grasp on this insect, and we still got to figure it out. But it is nice to have a new tool in the toolbox to go after it for the insecticide standpoint.
Well, lots to learn, lots for us to talk about. That means we can talk again.
That's right.
Hey, thanks for your time today. We'll see you in the weeks and months ahead.
Thank you.